And we're live, Lionel and I, this time to discuss idolatry again. But
It
how
just
have you
seemed the
been?
appropriate way to. Oh, I've been well, thank you, Claire, and I really enjoyed the show last time, and it seems like we had at least some tidy up to do at the tail end of that discussion.
Yes. Yes, and you raised a few points in your email, and I haven't really had a chance to look at them. And you mentioned something called the Church of Reason. Did you mean the cult of reason during the French Revolution?
I do don't refer specifically to it. I mean, I do believe that started a lot of the problems of modernity, even though there were forerunners to that, obviously, as well, and that we're still living in that cult age at the moment. Yes, this kind of idolatry of reason, for sure.
I mean, I think the problem is really with Christianity because
Yes,
I don't think Jews have a problem with their religion. They find it quite easy to believe, and Muslims find their religion quite easy to believe. But I guess if they live in the West, they want to, assimilate and enjoy the more degenerate pleasures of living in the West. So I can understand that. But for Christians, the problem is that they do worship a man and they can't deny it.
um, I think at the tail end of last discussion, uh, it was pointing towards a equivocation of definitions, and in some of our email back and forth subsequently, sorry, it was in the chat, the comment section of our last stream. We went back and forth a little bit about shirk and associationism and polytheism and idolatry, which are all related things, but I don't think they're precisely the same. What do you think about that?
Well, they are basically taking you away from the Abrahamic God. And I think we did mention Spinoza, did we not?
You did mention Spinoza, yes, and how
Yes,
that he might consider himself a worshipper or follower of the one unconditioned, but that his community saw him as a apostate.
exactly. They thought he was a heretic for
Yes,
denying that God cared about what we do, because he was saying, ain't life great? Isn't the universe beautiful? We don't need to believe that God takes an interest in us. He's just so magnificent, and the universe is so
sure,
beautiful and what
sure,
full of wonder. And for that, he was excommunicated. And I've noticed that with some rabbis or even historical scholars of Judaism, they don't seem to know the reason. And I'm jumping up and down and saying it's idolatry because according to the third principle of Judaism, you're not supposed to think of God as it being in any way material. And Spinoza equating God with the universe offense against that rule. And I assume that the reason why it is forbidden is because if we think God is in any way material, we in the universe will go around looking for him to worship and say, he's
yes,
here, he's there, he's this man or that woman or whatever. And
yes,
so that's the reason, I think.
yes. I've been having discussions with the mother of my children about the importance of proper metaphysics or theology or akida for the I think that's a term in Islam.
Creed,
And
doesn't that mean?
I think theology is a better way. I think it can be reduced to creed, but the way I'm using it, because the mother of my children is a Chinese medicine practitioner. Now,
Mm,
in Chinese medicine, it's based very much on a cosmological system of understanding what the world is. It doesn't necessarily, like Confucianism, make any comments on the creator at all, but it
mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean that it's exclusive of that possibility and that likelihood, actually. But because the mother of my children is trained in Western thought, even though she went through the proper like lineage master apprenticeship training and you know her master was very theologically correct in terms of those things, that the subtle always leads to gross. It's never anything bottom up. It's not that atoms and the material universe can actually determine the more subtle things. It's always the other way around. And Islam does that. So when you go to a doctor, even if the doctor is using cosmological medicine, I mean, this is in the Islamic world anyway. It's probably different now that we've all been so colonized. But everyone knew that, yes, fine, the doctor gave you the herbs and the herbs are very useful, but ultimately it's always Allah that heals, always. And that's extremely important. That, like, this is actually the most important part about raising a child correctly, that the Aqidah is correct even before they can reason, that they know that Allah is the provider, period. So it's not the cleverness of the pharmaceutical properties. It's not the energetic systems of the chi, whatever that you want to put it that way as well. It's not the planets in their alignments. It's all of those things that you have to, if you're an expert in that area, you have to know about, but they're not the cause. The cause is always Allah. So that kind of theology prevents, I think, idolatry, even as you play with all these things that seem to have a lot of utilitarian effect. So the theology itself actually purifies a lot of these things that otherwise, if your theology is wrong, will lead you straight into idolatry, including things like, objective natural laws and, all the things that we take for granted in this age of reason.
Yes. And as a Sufi, do you find other Muslims accusing you of idolatry? Because I think Sufis believe that God is immanent rather than transcendent.
I don't think you can really make any generalizations. Number one, I don't think I can call myself a Sufi either. I've certainly have, undergone an initiation, but I'm not part of that group anymore. But I think it's always a danger. And especially when we essentially have the wrong Aqidah, even if we say the right words about the theology, but when we are sick, we go straight to the Western doctor and pay no attention to the possibilities of healing in the proper theology. Like, no, we don't care about the atoms that much. The atoms can give us, the pharmacological science can give us ayat in order to help us determine what the symbols mean, and the symbols can help us determine what Allah wants for us and can guide us that way. But if we think for a second that giving this drug causes this to happen, causes that to happen, and therefore we get better or worse, we are already doing idolatry, in my opinion.
Yes. So I guess the whole idea of making such a big thing of idolatry for the Abrahamic religions is that if you do believe in the Abrahamic God, then you will believe in the entire narrative, which is that he gave the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai, and Christianity is built on Jewish scripture, and some would say that Islam is a synthesis of Judaism and Islam, with the best bits remaining and the worst bits taken out. So we can look at it like that. But I mean, basically, the idea is that God revealed a book of rules, and if you believe in the whole story, you would want to follow it. That would be a way of, funneling people into correct thought, wouldn't you say? It's like, well, if you believe in the Abrahamic God, then you would know about the Ten Commandments, and you do know that in the Ten Commandments he forbade idolatry and blasphemy.
You know already, I think, that we have very different limitations on the definitions of those things. I mean, I will not disagree that if you do that properly, that this is a very legitimate way of having proper faith and having proper theology, and I'm not doing idolatry. But I think there are other ways as well, myself, from my experience, and how much playing with these other things has benefited my life. I mean, I did get the impression, for example, I mean, you said straight away that you're pretty sure astrology is idolatry. And a simple reading from most Islamic history is that a lot of the scholars of Islam disagree with you. And
Oh, I didn't
maybe
know
they got
they had said anything. I suppose I would think it would fall under the category of sorcery and
well.
worshipping
So,
planets, you know.
but again, it just depends on your akida. So if
Mhm.
you think that the Neptune being in that position relative to the sun and to the earth is causing XYZ to happen here, then 100% that's idolatry. But if you take these all as signs of Allah that you can read and that you can do something with, just like you can read any patient's signs and symptoms, or you can read that if the horse is charging at me, that the speed I better move away to, dismount the horse in this particular way. You're taking it all as signs, but ultimately, just like with all medicine, Allah is the final cause. He does as He wills. He does as He wills in a way that's not random, so there's always signs and it's always logical. Then
Yes.
all of those things are cleaned of idolatry. But whatever you think that is safe, but you do the wrong Akida, it's all idolatry. Idolatry is possible with every single thing that we do. So you are not safe, I would say, if you just follow the laws, because that could be law idolatry.
But
And
it would
and
be a
that could be,
start, you see. It would be a
yes,
start
yes, it's
to
100%. It's
following
100%.
the
It's a start.
laws.
Yes, agreed. So I'm not saying that you never touch those things, because that's a dangerous thing as well, but that there are levels that you can take. There's levels of subtlety, and those levels of subtlety are probably not optional either. Like if you close yourself off to saying that as soon as I just do this or follow this ritual and pray 5 times a day in this particular way, that I'm completely safe, then you are in Shaitan's hands. You must always be aware that Shaitan is the cleverest of enemies.
Mhm. And lives inside our minds. But
Yes,
also,
yes.
I mean, the whole idea of believing in the Abrahamic God is that you are, by saying you believe in him, letting him into your mind to be your thought police, to protect you from your evil inclination, or Satan, if you prefer. And this is it. I mean, this is what people would call the internal dialogue of, a person like, I want to do this thing. Oh, but I know I shouldn't. Oh, but could I get away with it? But perhaps I shouldn't do it anyway. Or, well, if you can get away with it, why don't you do it? Who's going to know? What's going to happen? All these questions we ask ourselves as we, try and resolve our moral dilemmas.
This I would say is not the normal way that most humanity throughout history has thought. And especially, it's not really an East Asian way of dealing with the difficulties of how to make a good choice in life. Like this is all very guilt based, and in relation to laws and moral sentiment. There's a way to actually stay aligned in the East Asian traditions that, Confucianism, I don't think, is wrestling with, the devil on one side and the angel on another. This is really a very Christian thing. It's become something that most of us do now because of Western, the spread of, basic ways of being. But I don't think it's a universal. It doesn't
Right, so
really
how
sound
how
like.
would a Chinese person, I mean, is there an average Chinese person? I mean, I don't think so. You don't strike me as the average Chinese person. And I meet quite a
I'm
few
not
of them
talking about
online, and
now.
they don't agree with each other, do they? But they
Uh,
all have rather odd ideas, in my view. But I can't talk because a lot of people think I have odd ideas.
well, I don't really want to talk about average or whatever. I think I just want to get to the assumptions that the general way of wrestling with moral, ethical issues is about that, the devil and the angel on each side, and then you kind of, am I going to be loyal to the law or not? Like, again, that's not to say that that's not useful, but just like with the laws, if that's all you're doing and that's all you think that the game is, then there's a lot of the world and the way different people do things that you will simply not understand. When the Japanese were asked to explain how they could stay a moral people, how they made moral judgments, because there is no Abrahamic kind of thing at all in that tradition. A Christian scholar that was very, very well respected. I think he married some American woman as well. He wrote a book about Bushido. He wrote a book about how the Japanese basis
Warrior
of
class, for people who don't know.
Yes, well, it's the way of the warrior essentially, and that permeates the entire culture. And that's not really the same thing as is this the right thing or is the wrong thing. It's more actually a lot more to do with how can I stay coherent within myself, with my emotions and my logic and all the parts of myself. How do they not? If I make this particular decision, my will is going to betray my imagination, or my anger is going to betray my loyalty to my wife, or something like that. But what choice can I make to keep the kingdom of the body and the self coherent and unified? And that's essentially what Bushido is.
But isn't it basically saying an honorable warrior would do this and think that kind of thing? And then
Yeah,
the rule
but
has
I
to
mean,
be established,
obviously,
and then
because
maybe ways
not every single person is a warrior. So, but because the shogunate is a warrior society, that there's certain, and this is very Confucian. Like, it's a warrior society. The rulers are warriors. Their ways of doing things and thinking about things, which should be ultimately about how can I keep the kingdom coherent and not fighting each other for no reason, and therefore also inviting invasion and infiltration. So everything that I do, every choice that I make, is all about keeping the integrity of the kingdom. And that analogy fits perfectly with even yourself as an individual, and your family as well. So that if your behavior threatens the integrity of the family, then that is unethical behavior.
Yeah, so you're talking about the national interest of the shogunate, I guess. So
as an
yes,
analogy, also for one's individual, karmic consequences as well.
Well, yeah. So the national interest, I think, is the, in my view, the best way of expressing things, because if we say we want the government to govern in the national interest, then we would have to, take it on the chin when the government does things we don't like taxes or send us to war or whatever, because the government can say, well, it's in the national interest to raise taxes and blah blah blah, but then we can still argue, we can say how and why and those sorts of things, but I mean the point is the national interest is something that the ruling classes and those who are governed can agree on. Because if you say, it's only for the benefit of the warrior class that we do things this way, then anybody who isn't in the warrior class will feel excluded and want to overthrow them.
Sure. But that's, of course, different from, because I know you're not a fan of representative democracy. Sometimes you go into, let's say, the warrior class, the aristocracy in general, is going to make decisions that requires the sacrifice of the classes that have agreed to be slaves or vassals or serfs or whatever to them, because that's the trade of protection and leadership, because that's what leaders always have to do, even if it's not a class-based thing like any army. Obviously, the leaders are not going to always be walking into the firing line first. They're going to send people that are expendable to go forward, and those expendables agree to do it,
Yes,
or else there is no army.
Yes, exactly. The cannon fodder. So then everybody agrees that there must be some kind of hierarchy in the military, because if everybody was treated as equals, then nothing would be done.
That's right. So but that hierarchy. But that hierarchy cannot be arbitrary. It must always be based on what actually unifies everybody, so that everybody's always on the same team. And we're not getting the cannon fodder to go out only because otherwise we'll torture you. Like, there's a willingness for the good of the whole, to even sacrifice your life.
Yes,
even if it's a suicide
we have to
mission.
trust the leader, and that is how we accept the authority of the leader. But if we don't trust him, then we're not going to accept his authority, and we'll never do anything he says.
so like this is where the English language is interesting, because you could say this is what loyalty and faith is. So obviously that's the kind of faith that's different from faith in an Abrahamic God, as you say. Faith, when you think about the word, is a lot of it has to do with loyalty, really, rather than this kind of belief in something that you can't prove physically. So where does faith come from in a leadership that might require you to more or less inevitably die? That faith and loyalty is based on a sense of coherent whole, and it's not because you're going to be dead. So why are you doing it for? Because you're all on the same page in terms of what's important. That hierarchy is not something that the leaders can just do whatever they feel like, because that will destroy that unity almost immediately, and then it just becomes a tyranny essentially.
Well, I suppose the beliefs of the cannon fodder would be important, because they'd have to think, well, even if I die, I will go to heaven because I did the right thing according to my national religion, and people will think I have gone to heaven, if I martyr myself in this cause. And I was also trying to say that, men have to basically die for the principle of being men, because, it is their role to be the cannon fodder, right? Because in the olden days, when Europeans had absolute monarchs, that the whole purpose of a king would be the person leading his army into war, and he would have to go first, right? And he would, and the men would follow, because they think, well, he believes he's going to win, he's leading, and if anything bad happens, he would be the first to go. And if he does go, then we can just give up the fight. But if he continues, we will fight with him, and perhaps he will lead us to victory. But that was the most primitive form of battle. That there would be a leader leading his army, and he would have to go first. He can't be, at the back saying, "You guys go," because then he would lose his authority.
We seem to be straying off the topic of idolatry quite a bit, but
we're talking about trust and hierarchy, and I'm saying the idea of hierarchy is that God is above humanity, and obviously humanity would have different degrees of authority. I mention monarchs because Christianity would defend the divine right to rule of absolute monarchs.
Sure.
And people would, I suppose, for a while believe that, or pretend that they believed in it, because I think basically Europeans didn't have a choice. If they said, no, king, I don't accept your religion, I think I'll be a Buddhist or a Muslim, he would get short shrift and be burnt at the stake. So Europeans were, in fact,
Claire seems to have dropped out. Well, I agree mostly, well, to some degree, with what Claire is saying. Oh.
Yes, I can hear you, but
oh, good.
There was a bit of a buzz earlier, so
no worries.
I may not have heard everything that you said.
I think that, there's an important essence of what you're saying that's completely correct. The medieval history of Western Europe is quite varied. There is definitely like an early medieval period that's quite different from the late, because the Inquisition wasn't always there, for example, and the way that the Catholic Church, marriage wasn't even always a sacrament. It used to be not really the church's business. They just kind of left it to the local common law, so to speak. But yeah, that's true. The centralization of the Catholic Church and how much power they had over people's minds, it really makes me think ultimately of a cult as well. So the cult of reason, I think, has a forerunner in the cult of the Catholic Church. The Orthodox Church was not like that in that same kind of way, and even though they have the same kind of problematic Trinitarian idolatries, for example, you can't really see the cult of the French Revolution ever coming from Russia. But yeah, saying all that. So I really want to separate a kind of hierarchy that is more or less basically a cult based on gaslighting of some degree, and people just being terrified. So maybe you're not saying go out to the front line or we'll shoot you or we'll torture you, but you're terrified of hell, and because of the Catholic Church told you so, that if you don't go ahead and do that, then it'll be worse for you. So that's not the kind of unity that I think that the Japanese were talking about with Bushido, because they're not terrified of hell in that kind of way. That's not why they're going forth for the unification of the army and the peoples. And I think you can be effective by essentially running a cult army, and you can win a lot of battles, but it's going to bite you in the bum eventually. The kind of willingness to self-sacrifice that is actually based on real unity is something of a different species. I want to put forward to you.
Well, I mean, Imperial Japan is over and out, but I guess the point I'm trying to make about religion is that, and in particular, organized religion, because I think we were talking. You started off this conversation by talking about the Chinese thinking in this way and that, and I'm saying the Chinese never had organized religion. I mean, they might be expected to perform certain national rites and whatever, but they were never told this is what you have to believe, and this is your confirmation ceremony, and you have to believe X, Y, and Z, and if you don't, you're going to be a heretic and you're going to be punished. I don't think anything like that existed in China, but for the European, it was completely different. It's like it's organized religion. Every Sunday you come to church for further indoctrination and confirmation of all that your king wants you to believe in, and you be with these other Christians to talk amongst yourselves and reaffirm your Christian identity. And if your children are not baptized or confirmed, things will be thought about you that will lower you in status. So you better come to church regularly. And oh yes, we'll make it entertaining and give you beautiful buildings to sit in and beautiful music to listen to and put on a good show for you. But you have to come every Sunday as a sign of your respectability. And so it was done in a different way. And that was how European culture is different to how it was done in China. And I agree with you that we have to, in order to retain our self-respect, we can't be thinking every day we are oppressed, we have the most horrible government in the world that wants us to make us believe in nonsense and lies and don't want us to breed and want us to die childless and gay, and that is what we don't want to think. But I think a lot of Westerners do now think that about their government, because the hierarchy of the patriarchy has utterly gone. Because you were talking also about military leadership. So the best man at fighting would lead the society in Japan, as you say, the shogun.
And this is a great follow-on from what I was trying to say, because I agree with you that the healthy patriarchy is gone, but I agree with even the left and feminists that the unhealthy patriarchy is in place actually, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're quite incompetent, and the only tool that they have in their hands is brainwashing, is propaganda and gaslighting of people in order to stop people killing each other or to keep some semblance of order, but it can't last, and obviously it gets people rebelling eventually. And that's the difference, because there clearly is hierarchy still now. It's just people there's no unity. It's hierarchy to replace unity.
Yes. So the culture of the West is sex and drugs and rock and roll, and this makes me think of the Europeans when they were selling opium to the Chinese. But what that's kind of bad enough when you're behaving like a drug dealer. But when you drug your own people to stop them from rising up against you, arguably that's even worse than being the international drug dealer trying to get the Chinese hooked on opium. That you keep legalizing all these drugs and inventing more psychotropic drugs to give to your neurotic people who are suffering from depression and all kinds of mental health issues because the government is making them mentally ill.
Cool. Can we just come back to this for a second? Because I think we can, but going back to the root of the topic of idolatry and shirk and all that, because especially when it comes to distractions and addiction, I really want to bring these topics together, particularly of idolatry and addiction. I think there's something really key there. So can I ask you, Claire, is there any difference between shirk or association of created beings with the immortal unborn creator and idolatry, or are they the same thing to you?
Well, Jews have two different words for it. So they would call idolatry avodah zarah, and then they'd call associating partners with God shituv. And the kind of being a bit vague about which is worse, right? Because, on the one hand, they've lived in Europe for so long and they're, under Christian rule, and they want to think that Christianity is not the worst. And but there are some rabbis who say, obviously, shituv, associating partners with God, is worse. And the Quran takes the same position, right? It does say associating partners with God is still an unforgivable sin.
Unforgivable, yes.
Yes. So I would say, okay, we can just sort of imagine how God might feel about it. Would he be more disapproving of Hindus who, basically they just, invented idols and started worshipping them, which was how humanity started? They would, think, oh, isn't this mountain magnificent, whatever? We'll think there's a mountain god, a volcano god, a river goddess, and this is kind of, part and parcel of Greek mythology. And I've forgotten my point now. Okay, so I'm saying polytheism is a kind of, going into different shops and buying your different things from the butchers, from the, fruiterers and, the ironmongers, and basically monotheism is one-stop shopping, which is obviously a more advanced idea than, going up and down the market, buying things from different sellers. So we're talking about convenience, and obviously one-stop shopping is a more powerful idea than, going to this god to hear about your romantic problems, going to the god of medicine for your, health problems. You just put it together, and also it's probably less divisive as a society. And in order to make people, believe correctly, I guess quite totalitarian measures have to be adopted, hence Christianity, hence the idea of, organized religion. You have to believe in this or you're wrong and you're a heretic and we're going to punish you. So, that would be the essential difference between how Europeans govern themselves and how China ruled itself. Because
what about the Islamic world? What about the Islamic world where Jews were treated quite well? There were Christians in the court of the Sultan. Zoroastrianism is still there. That's why it still exists in Iran today. How do they deal with that kind of thing? And there were probably polytheists as well. There certainly were polytheists fighting side by side with the Prophet under the Constitution of Medina.
Yes, so the Constitution, which is basically a rule system, is like, yes, you can join us, but only if you agree to these rules. And obviously they agree, and then they seem to be obeying the rules, and they're happy. You'd be happy to include them. But basically, the rule system is this concept. It's an abstract concept, right? It's not a person. It's a system, and all these ideas might be, I guess, hard for people to really grasp, and they just like things to worship, idols and personalities and people, and that, I suppose, is fundamentally dangerous because all men are fallible and people do go wrong, and the desire to worship something can be fanatical. And therefore,
So,
the idea that when you go wrong, go and look at the rules and see if which of you is breaking them. If you're arguing about that, and this is a kind of legalistic concept that may help prevent violence. Would help.
and that's the basis of a lot of your promoting of secular Coranism, I suppose.
Yes, it's because I was legally trained, I suppose. So Georgia is better than war, and if you can go to court first before you take out your swords and start, killing or slashing at each other, that would be good. And there should be a system of doing it.
But it wouldn't
Otherwise,
regulate.
it's like, who are you to tell me what to do, kind of thing.
Sure, and it wouldn't regulate, for example, polytheism or idolatry.
Well, it would, because I actually agree with you that a Jew or a Muslim praying correctly and saying that they believe in God could also be guilty of hidden idolatry. And that was the concept we did mention, and which does exist in the Hadith. And I think it's important to know that even when we think we're doing everything right, we may still be wrong.
But I mean, in terms of the the legislative part of the state, that secular Quranism is essentially, you're talking about. I mean, would you say you're trying to do a religious revolution, or it's just more like a revolution of how we're governed?
Well, a revolution of how we're governed, which is obviously based on a book believed to come from God. But I'm saying, you were saying that God is always logical. And I would agree with you, but only if he is not Jesus, right? Because you really cannot reconcile how Christians want to believe that God and Jesus are the same entity. It is very difficult to understand and explain. And this
in the same way that Muslims and Jews worshipping externally correctly, being the classical Pharisee, can still be doing idolatry. Do you think it's possible that a Christian doing all mouthing the wrong things and saying that they believe that the Trinity is and Jesus was a God and all that sort of thing, is it possible that the way they live their life and practice things is essentially monotheistic?
Well, yes, because they are on their third global empire, so they have done quite well for themselves. But I would say that their problem, the rot set in the last 50 years, which basically was 50 years of feminism, which has completely collapsed their patriarchy.
So if you agree with that it's possible to do the wrong creed that is just flawed from a monotheistic point of view, and just doesn't make any sense, but the way people practice can actually be basically non-idolatrous, that they basically just believe in the one God, because you do see that in how Christians actually practice. And most people agree that the concept of the Trinity, most people don't even really think about. Like, you say these particular things, but the way that you live your life may still very well be essentially monotheistic. So that makes. So the reason why I bring this up is because I asked you if you think idolatry and shirk are the same thing, and I'm pretty sure, because I don't know anything about the Jewish law. I only read the Quran, and it's very clear that idolatry and shirk are separate things, and only shirk is the unforgivable practice, the unforgivable thing.
Yes,
I think idolatry is a dangerous thing, and it can lead to shirk. And if you carry it through to its full conclusions, and you just leave it without proper correcting and guidance for generations, it will definitely just go to shirk. But it's not shirk. So my secular Coranism would allow idolatry, because I think a lot of the point of what idolatry is it's a kind of cope. It's a kind of cope for, and I guess in Christian terms you can say our sin, but I would more put it in terms of when we are raised badly because our culture is crazy and parents don't really know what they're doing anymore, then developmentally and epigenetically, there's a lot of flaws in our psyche that, make us more likely to be addicts, more likely to be irrational and emotional, not really being able to listen to points of view that are not our own. And that pretty clearly to me is why the Christian liberal world, no matter what they say, is actually really, really intolerant and can't really listen to points of view that are not their own. It's not inherent in being white or Christian. It's inherent in being, you've had generations of being raised from childhood that they haven't given you the full the human capacity for actually listening to people.
Yes.
And so when you're like that, and you've maybe been like that in your ancestry for generations, grabbing onto things that aren't actually coherent but still make your life more stable, it's understandable. It's completely understandable. So reason can be one of those things, or you can make the self an idol. You can make love an idol. You can make heroin an idol. All sorts of things. Because of that generation of developmental error, it's virtually impossible for you to actually be monotheistic straight away. But my experience is what the Quran especially does, really straightening out the ancestral errors and confirming but correcting. Not like what the Christians did, that they were pagan before, and then they had certain traditions that obviously were of value to them and kept certain things coherent. And then one day, whoop, nope, they're all demons now. And all your ancestors that you wished that when you died you would go join, no, they're all in hell now. And when you die, you're going to sit next to Jesus and whatever in a sexless life in heaven. So that complete severing of that tradition, that I don't think Islam did that. And obviously that's something that Confucius would never say that is a wise thing to do. You don't just kind of go, yeah, all of my forefathers, they're in hell because they were deluded and evil people. No, the Quran says there's practices for every people, and the Quran is here to confirm by correcting. There's problems in what you're doing, but we're not just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, which, again, this is clearly something that the Western lineage loves doing all the time. Like one day they're on this side and the next day they're on that side, and they just keep flipping back and forth, back and forth. I think the root of that actually is the severing from the ancestral tradition, that they're running to the utilitarianism of, making the Roman Empire Christian. It
They don't
caused a lot
understand
of
their own
problems.
history. I mean, this is the thing, and they, and because really the only form of social conservatism, I mean, social conservatism is basically based on religion. And religion is all the religions we've heard of, the top 5 are just saying no sex with anyone not your spouse, and your spouse can only be a member of the opposite sex, not within the forbidden degrees of consanguinity. That is really the base point of eugenics and sexual morality. And if you want to go,
that's not supported by the Quran, though. Of course, I mean, there's a lot of latitude for what you can do with with your right hand.
Yeah, so there are lots of ways of cheating, right? Then you can say, well, what about same
But it's
sex?
not cheating.
What about
by the Quran, that's not cheating.
Yeah, so but the thing is, that because the Quran actually says you'll only get into trouble if you're caught committing a public indecency offense. So you can still get away with it if nobody catches you doing it in a public place. So you can manage that, can't you, gay boy? That kind of thing. And well, for heterosexual people, well, don't get pregnant without a marriage license. So if you want to do that, you want to cheat, but once you are caught having illegitimate offspring, then you have broken the rule. I mean, there are kind of bottom line acts that will not be tolerated. And Islam makes it very clear in its legalistic way. And I think once upon a time, Christians understood all that until, the sex revolution, which told them that it's now okay to have sex with anyone as long as they are a consenting adult.
So that's part of what I'm saying about that, throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just flipping to these two sides, these two extremes. And sometimes at the same time, so that now left and right are just basically they can't even talk to each other at all. This is very much a Western pattern. It doesn't really happen so much in other societies. Of course, there's going to be differences.
Yes. So you were saying people can't even talk to each other if they don't agree with each other. And I thought, this is very feminine. It's the women who can't just discuss politics. It's the women who will regard, a disagreement as, a mortal offense. And since there are so many women in positions of power, this is the kind of atmosphere that they have created until everybody's afraid to say anything. And they're going to use the worst words that they can think of, racist, fascist, misogynist, to get you cancelled for saying, certain things. And they win if they use that accusation on you first, right?
Can I say a very, very sexist thing about this? But Quranically sexist.
Did you just
anyway?
Sexism?
No. I want to say something even more sexist, if you don't mind.
Go on.
Well, I actually disagree on a fundamental point about that. This is just the natural, normal way that women behave. I think this is the natural, normal way that women behave when anxiety overtakes them, and anxiety will always overtake them when they're atomized. Like there's no strong community of women. That is, that's the norm in the Islamic world, but not so much now, and not protected by men. When women are properly housed and kept in a way that they can commune with them on a regular basis, and they know everything that's going on in the community because of the network of women. They do not behave this way, and they are in fact the best listeners. I mean, women have to be the mothers after all. So if you have a child that disagrees with you, and it's normal for women to just lose it when the child disagrees with them, then none of us will be raised very well. But it's just that modernity and the West really do not understand how to raise us, partially because they don't understand women, and they don't understand how men and women are, as the Quran says, a cover for each other. We need each other to not be insane, and we both go insane quite a bit when we don't understand how to interact with each other properly. And this is intergenerational as well.
Mad, but without each other, we also go mad.
Yes.
And as the English say, can't live with them and can't live without them.
I don't think that's true that we drive each other mad either. I mean, if you rely basically on Western Akida and especially the Church of Reason, 100% you will drive each other mad. But if you go back to proper Akida and don't assume that reason is more important than emotionality, then emotionality and reason actually have quite a comfortable, mutually supporting relationship. The Chinese phrase of, husband and wife are raising the tray to each to the eyebrows. Deep respect between husband and wife as one of the Bagang in Confucianism. Like, it's really an essential relationship to get right if you want anything to function.
Yeah, so there is this Chinese advice, ancient Chinese advice, that husband and wife are to treat each other as honored guests within their own homes.
Yes.
And that sounds a bit, onerous and difficult, I suppose. It's difficult to be always the most hospitable host or the best behaved guest
again, but I think this does have to do with what I've observed in a lot of my lovely Anglo friends in here in Australia. Like, I think the older traditional, especially Eastern idea of guest host was, it's not putting in this ridiculous effort to throw a party and to honor people that come in. No, it's much more relaxed than that, and it's actually just kind of a way of being. A honored guest is someone that you entertain them. And what does entertainment, what's the basis of that? It's not throwing Netflix at them or giving them a sumptuous meal. It's actually entertaining their point of view above your own, just for now. So if there's a difficult opinion, like you say, that the women of today that I'm putting forward are so anxious because they're not protected, etc. If they hear an idea that is not, yes, insecurity. If they hear an idea that they don't like, then they're just going to generally just blurt out that they disagree, and then there's a difficulty straight away.
They'll call you names.
Yes, then call you names. Now, if you know how to entertain, then the guest that comes in, who even could be your husband, comes up with something that initially your gut reaction is, no, I don't like that. But if you're a good host, you'll go, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. And who knows, as that keeps on going, you might be turned around, or you could actually put forward something to your husband. Have you thought about this? And they could actually be converted to your point of view as well. So the ability to entertain is so essential to normal man-wife, husband and wife relations. If you no one can entertain anymore,
verbal and non-verbal.
But I mean, communication skills these days, I don't think it often includes how difficult listening actually is, because it's so deeply spiritual thing. If you're anxious and you have idolatry about reason, for example, then your idolatry of reason would go, well, my reason says that what you just said is a bunch of, it sounds like miars. And my idolatry of reason requires me to counter what you say, or else you might fall into, the opposite of reason, because I know that that's wrong. But if you do monotheism properly, we know that Allah knows what's in our hearts, and that He will only inform us about which we differed after we're dead. So none of us are ever really going to know what exactly is the truth, and so entertainment behooves us, I would say. That's the correct akida.
Well, I think people do. I think the reason why Christians block me is because they actually know they can't win the argument. And, when they thought they won the argument, it was just a matter of condemning, someone for heresy and having them burnt at the stake, and they don't have that option now. So they can't defend the Trinity. And what I think is really stopping them is their sense of status, really, because I've noticed a lot of Christians are now hanging around with Muslims because the Muslims have been very patient and kind with them, and I think, well, perhaps eventually they'll come round, but in real life they can't bear the thought of hanging out with Muslims, and that is why they still cling to their Christian identity, and obviously this idea is probably to do with racism or snobbery, a sense of what is right, and that kind of thing. And I think these issues can be resolved by just acknowledging them, you see. And that's why I keep reminding these Muslims, you have to obey chapter 18 verse 4, because these Christians are not going to pick up hints from you. They probably deep down agree with you, but what's stopping them from coming over to Islam is the horror of being ostracized by their friendship and family circle, of people looking at them funny, of hanging around with immigrants whom they consider to be low status. That is really their real problem, in my view.
Mm. Yeah.
And they can acknowledge that, and then they can go over that obstruction, but they have to actually acknowledge that this is really their issue, not because they find Islam hard to believe. Because once you say you believe in the Abrahamic God, then you have to acknowledge, oh yes, but there may be only one Abrahamic God, but there's more than one Abrahamic religion. So which one is true? And it's like, well, if you're not a Jew, there's really only Christianity and Islam to choose from. So what's their difficulty? It remains a difficult. I mean, they could still say, well, Christianity is still the most powerful religious group in the world. We're still the biggest, even though we are, decreasing in numbers. Well, the Muslims are increasing in numbers, but we can, for the moment, choose to not read the writing on the wall or pretend we don't understand it. Because I think Christianity is basically, built on sand. People, of course, are going to pretend to believe if the alternative is to lose status or be burnt at the stake. And as for, non-Europeans in Africa and Asia converting to Islam, it must be because they think, oh, the European, he's so militarily supreme. He must be doing something right. Perhaps it's his religion. And if we convert to Christianity, the European will give us, better jobs or something than, Asians and Africans who don't convert to Christianity. It could be, just that shallow, self-serving, careerist reason, which, won't help
there's
you
two things.
now.
There's two things that leap out to me and what you just said. I mean, when it comes to be so reliant on social status and approval of your peers and culture in general for deciding what one believes in, cult, again, springs to mind very, very strongly, because that's how cults work. I mean, I don't think Christianity is as strong a cult as, say, Heaven's Gate or something like that. But people have studied these kind of cults quite a bit and looking at the dynamics of how they function, and the social pressure, and the what am I going to do if I disagree with the great leader, because everyone will start to ostracize me. It's a very powerful force, but it's particularly powerful again in people that have been deracinated and don't really have any loyalty to their ancestral way anymore. Because if they've already been cut off from that, then if they lose their immediate social approval, then a lot of anxiety at the very least. So
yes, exactly. You talk about
so that's number one.
Ancestral approval. We don't want to obey mum and dad who may disinherit us.
Yes,
if
that's
we
right.
choose a religion that they hate.
And like I mentioned last time, the approval from mum in particular is not, it's not a small thing psychologically for humans. Like as babies, we relied on mummy being happy with us to just be fed and to not throw us out the window when we're crying and pooping and whatever all the time. So I think the evidence from psychology now that all of these neotenate experiences with our mother powerfully affect how we act as rational adults, I think it's indisputable. But even further than that, it even determines the kind of genes that get expressed. So they actually change our physicality. So that's the cult anxiety approval thing. But the other thing you were saying, I think it's left my mind now. Yep, sorry, I've lost it.
No, but you see, a lot of these ideas are not consciously acknowledged, and they're only, felt in emotion. It's like, I've never liked those people. I never liked the look of them. And the thing is, people go by emotion because it's certainly more overwhelming than reason. Even the most rational person feels their own emotions more deeply than the call of reason. And if you don't even have the principle of following reason, you will always be motivated by greed and fear and hatred. And that is why reason is so important. And I think even the reasonable even atheists will want to be associated only with other atheists who are honest and reasonable. Even if you don't believe in God, you would want, people to be, capable of being persuaded by reason and capable of entertaining an idea without accepting it, which is the mark of an educated man. And all these ideas, which are Western, I got them from somewhere. I didn't, make it all up. They used to to save themselves, but no longer. So it seems to me that they're suffering from some kind of amnesia or dementia or failure of their state education system.
I think again, it's this back and forth thing. It's more schizophrenia. I mean, straight after the Age of Enlightenment, when the Church of Reason really put its roots down, was German Romanticism, and then it's endless. So yeah, schizophrenia is more the thing, but I think that the reason why reason is not sufficient, why we have to really be careful about this idolatry of reason, is the simple fact, like the Quran says, humans were made anxious. And if we don't do the developmental side properly, then we may use reason, we think, but we're just using rationalization all of the time. Like, if we don't get that anxiety dealt with by, for example, going back to healthy patriarchy in order to protect the world of women so that they're not constantly anxious and projecting. And mothers aren't raising the sons properly, so they're not always doing everything they can to please women all the time. Then reason cannot be the only answer. Like, reason is part of the story, but that the base of reason is not reason. That the base of reason is a proper upbringing, and mother doing a proper upbringing, that she's not doing that based on reason. So yes, reason is very important, but it will not convince a lot of people that are basically constantly anxious, and probably supplementing so not having that anxiety be very obvious through various idolatries. So that's why I think that it's very important that idolatry is not banned. Like, shirk is unforgivable.
I have no plans to ban it.
Oh, good.
Absolutely.
Fundamentally, that's fair enough. Fundamentally, it must not be banned because it's a point to hold on to for people that are just addicted and anxious and complete slaves, basically, to whatever psychological problem they have, and it keeps things from getting worse. And from that position, you can that anxiety is under control enough for them to be able to entertain something that will solve that problem, which is, in my opinion, the monotheism of the Quran, because that's exactly what it did for me. I would say that I was also a idolater of reason, and always looking for mother to solve all my problems. And the Quran solved those things very, very, very fast. And immediately that the result was a much smoother family life and relations with the mother of my children.
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, I think I'm beginning to understand what you're saying now. That you're saying reason doesn't win the argument when you're reasoning with a woman, probably, and instead of arguing with her.
A man as well. I mean, a man under a cult, or a woman that's not protected by men properly, and they're full of anxiety and wanting social approval for various ways. No, reason will not do anything.
Yes, but because fundamentally, you can only reason with a person if you're using the same words that mean the same to both of you. So you can tell a person who doesn't believe in God that they should do this because it's moral and whatever, and they can even agree with you. It would be preferable not to kill and steal and rape and whatever. But if they don't think good will be rewarded and evil punished in the afterlife by God who does these things, then they won't do those things. They'll just be saying, well, the argument is sound, but what are you going to give me to make me agree with you? And you and whose army is going to make me support your scheme, even if it is arguably correct.
My journey to being a Quran believer, my journey to being a Quran believer had, I mean, maybe that will work with a lot of people, and I don't think it ever would have worked with me to take me from vanilla Chinese atheism into believing so fully hearted with the Quran. My particular way of doing it was I just read the Quran a lot, and I didn't really use reason to say that, well, heaven and hell, or I mean, not heaven and hell, Jannah and Gehenna, they're very different things. And I better do this. And if I believe in that, then I have to think rationally in that way. That completely wasn't it. Like, entertaining that the Quran is exactly what it says it is, and that this is how the world is. I noticed simply entertaining it killed my anxiety. So by killing my anxiety and entertaining the possibility that this is how things are, even if I do not know, I do not yet have yakin or of certainty of these things, I'm noticing that it's making me much less anxious because the world makes sense and it's in the hands of someone that cares for us and hasn't left. I think a lot of the Age of Reason is basically based on deism. So they're still clearly believing in God, but they reckon he left. And he's just left it up to us to reason things out and to use natural laws to make heaven on earth or something. I guess I inherited that by just being raised in Australia. And yeah, it made me very anxious. I didn't realize until I entertained what the Quran is saying, that every single moment is only possible because he is here at every single moment and knows everything, and there is a plan.
Yes.
So that's how I became a believer, because it just solves so many problems, and you don't have to believe first or have it imposed on you first, and then you use your logic. It doesn't have to be that way. I did the more poetic
route. You can just entertain the idea from time to time, and if it gives you spiritual comfort, you will slide into belief, right? Because I was an atheist to begin with, but I thought the book was fair enough. So why don't I use it as a basis of supporting my ideas, which I thought it did, or could arguably be said to support my ideas.
Yeah.
But then there were so many people, and are so many people, who really, really hate the idea of the Abrahamic God, because I think fundamentally, they're so stuck in their primitive anthropomorphism that they think God is a Jew. And I hate Jews. And then, of course, their Christian ancestry will, be thinking, yes, Jesus is a Jew, and we have been worshipping Jesus for nearly 1,700 years. So this is just swimming around in their minds, and they can't get it out. They hate Jews. They know they worship a Jew, and that's why they retreat into neo-paganism, just to get away from this, totalizing idea that they can't get away from, the Abrahamic God. But then neo-paganism is really, well, there's no advantage in creating a new religion, because new religions are always treated as cults. I mean, Judaism was a cult, so was Christianity and Islam, when they started out, and they became successful. But all religions, there is no advantage in being a cult, because then people won't take you seriously and will persecute you, and so that's why I think the sensible thing would not be to create a new religion, but actually to look at one that's been around for 1,400 years, and also the only one to ever keep themselves in existence, using the laws of God, and still having a theocracy. I mean, Jews haven't been living in their own theocracy for 2,000 years. So I mean, these are just sort of objective, undeniable facts. Not that they, move anybody these days, but you would have thought they could say, oh yes, it can't be denied that, Muslims have been around for 1,400 years, and they're the only people with a theocracy. That is a bit scary, but that is also part of its power. You really can't get through to Westerners now using lines of argument. It's always, what's in it for me? What are you going to do to make me agree with you? And even if I agree with you, I see no advantage in saying so, because then the people around me who hate Jews will hate me and kick me out of my online community because, blaming Jews is now a sacred belief system. That will
So
get
how much steam do you still have to keep on doing what you're doing then, if this is the main fruit?
well. I just don't. It's.
Are you going to give up soon?
I'm more certain that I'm right. The more I carry on. I know this is, very surprising to a lot of people who say, well, shouldn't you give up by now because nobody agrees with you? But I don't think any of my suppositions have been wrong.
I didn't say give up. I said, to continue to do it the way that you're doing it.
It's a compulsion now, Lionel. It's a compulsion. I can't stop myself.
Can you change tactics, though?
I mean, what? How would you suggest I do it? Should I be just kinder to Christians? I don't think that's going to work because there are lots of Muslims who are trying to be nice to Christians. And I'm just saying you're delaying the dropping of the penny just by being nice to them. Because if you're nice to them, they'll think, oh, that there's something in Christianity yet.
I think this is definitely, for example, where I can see that Westerners, Anglos in particular, don't understand hospitality. They don't really understand. They think hospitality is being nice. And no, sometimes hospitality is yelling at your guests for breaking the rules. Hospitality, I think, is not to be underestimated. To address the major problems with why reason has become rationalization, and the more we use reason without fixing hospitality, the more it'll just cause conflict and difficulty and obstinacy. But I think, for example, when you mentioned neo-paganism, for example, a lot of the neo-paganism from the Westerners comes from people that actually have the correct idea that Christianity is a problem, but their ancestry is in Christianity, and they want to go back to finding some kind of rationation. And if they can't do the Christian thing because they sense the idolatry, or I mean, if not the idolatry, then certainly the flaws and in the arrogance, then they're going to try what was before then. And I think that's something to be lauded somewhat, because if we don't come to a good relationship with our own line, then hospitality, whether it be on the giving side and entertaining people, or being able to even receive entertainment, it's impossible. So that's what I mean, like in terms of changing tactic, not changing what your ultimate goal is, but I don't think, like I said, reason by itself will not work.
Well, I mean, I can try a range of ways and a range of messages and campaigns. And my latest one is, help me save white people from Christianity. But, the thing is, if they're being emotional, they will, it's totally understandable that they should, run back to the religion of their ancestors when their ancestors were imperial and successful and, that kind of thing. But that's just showing they don't understand their own history, because, back then, everybody had to go to church if they wanted to be considered respectable and do a whole bunch of things that they wouldn't dream of doing now. I mean, even taking the kids to church means that you have to be married to your spouse. If you're not married to them, will you be taking your kids to church? It will be very hard to get them to go.
I think that's definitely part of the story, but the ability to entertain, I think, was stronger when the Western Europeans were, at least their anxiety was sublimated by their loyalty to the Catholic Church, and then like the anxiety is still there. The problem with their cutting off from their ancestors is still there. But while they're under that very strong control and perhaps even manipulation, the anxiety is less, and their ability to listen and entertain is greater than it is now. So, there was a movement, I don't know what happened to it, based around the Constitution of Medina, the covenants of the Prophet, where some of the documents speak about, for example, that it's the Muslim duty to protect churches. And it's very clear that if you marry a Christian woman, you must allow your wife to continue to receive spiritual guidance from their Christian leader. So there's a kind of inherently superior position that if not Muslims, then certainly Quran believers can place themselves over. That because we allow all these things in a way that the Catholic Church would never allow, or any other of those kind of imperious Western empires. The Muslims have a history of great tolerance, but 100% the Muslims are superior, but we look after you. So that's why the Jews are so happy to live in the Islamic world, and there were so many Christians of various denominations, etc. Because not just because we have the power and there's nothing you can do, but because things are actually better here, even though the Muslims are our bosses and we don't necessarily believe what they say. So having that superior position that encompasses and can see that, for example, because of your constitution, a lot of you guys of Western European ancestry, it's probably better. I mean, I can see that there's no way you're going to accept Islam for the various emotional and other reasons. You're better off being Christian than you are being atheist and, rainbow-colored transsexual.
Yeah, because I mean,
so for a secular Quranicist to encourage Christianity and say, no, it's a lot full of problems, but I can see it's good for you, and it's a better step for you, for you to walk into idolatry. But if you accept that my guidance, then I can keep you away from shirk. Then I think this is one way to not have all the Christians block you.
Well, I don't mind, because I just feel that when they block me, it's because they've understood what I'm saying and they have no argument. So that's why they block
maybe,
me.
But maybe there's more. We don't know.
But basically, if they were able to ask the logical question, they would know I welcome Hindu secular Quranists, Buddhist secular Quranists, atheist secular Quranists, because the whole point of secular Quranism is that it's not a belief system, but a legal system that uncompromisingly supports the First Amendment. Because back to what we were saying, if Jews and Muslims properly praying can be guilty of shirk, then who are they to forbid idolatry in the wider world?
Nice.
So all you can do is hope that eventually people will feel confident, or the atmosphere will become more hospitable to the idea of people living under Sharia. And once they live under Sharia, in 2 or 3 generations, Islam will be the thing. Because, if people living in a society that has Sharia, if they have children, they're going to be using Allah to frighten their children, right? Rather than the bogeyman and, demons and whatever. Because that would be a more effective way of doing it than using any other system.
No, my kids just fear me. But
yes,
but anyway,
that's enough.
So yeah, that's fine from a legal, again, a kind of a rational point of view. But the next step is to do the really healthily feminine thing, which is to have the mercy to go that this will be better for you, but I know that you can't take that step because I've come to understand you from the inside really well, like a mother does the child, and you're not ready for this. And that's why I'm even going to help you, not just say it's allowed. I'm going to help you embrace your Christianity. I'm going to help your peoples and your kids be good Christians, because you can't handle this stuff yet. And that's where, again, entertainment is so important, because you really have to see from their shoes, not just make an undefeatable rational argument. But yeah, that's...
I think it makes them even more neurotic when they try to defend the Trinity and cannot. I think, and that's why they always, become very offensive and embrace the issue of, Aisha's age and, repeat the same old Islamophobic tropes, because they cannot defend the Trinity. And, there's always the Trinity. Oh, what about Aisha's age? What about, kill, not, of the unbelievers wherever you find them? It's almost a kind of predictable, knee-jerk response from them.
Generally, that sounds like a very masculine response. But I mean, most of the Western converts to Islam are women, after all. And the women, as we said at the end of the last stream, who's the best at detecting hypocrites? It's kids, women, and dogs. And so, but the flip side of that is that women are also very good at understanding a people's and probably a man especially that just doesn't have that kind of hang up and isn't rationalizing constantly. So I don't think even if they were someone that knows all the tropes about Aisha and all that sort of thing, I don't think they would care when they get that impression of the person that isn't like the Christian men that are much weaker in their emotional being, even if they're very combative with their words and their logic. So again, this is a different methodology possible, kind of arguing with your embodiment rather than your words.
Well, I mean, it should be very easy to understand. Like, Christianity has caused them nothing but problems. The wars of the Reformation, very bloody between, the Catholic Church and the Protestants, and and then starting, it has failed to protect them as a race.
It should be. Why, it should be, but it isn't that simple because it's also provided, however temporary, just like, a shot of heroin, but, we all know how hard it is to just kind of go cold turkey and that kind of thing. It provides a lot of relief as well. So to really understand that is the key to, getting people off their cultic drugs and idolatry.
Well, yeah. So I think, if the government were to entertain the idea by platforming it on mainstream media, I mean, that is how the ball would start to roll. But currently, some people might not agree with me or believe me, but I think there is some kind of global media conspiracy not to discuss my little idea, even amongst the dissident right, because they're all aware of it, but they refuse to discuss it. Apart from the honourable exception of Felix Rex, through whom we met. Yes.
But I mean, so Felix gave you the space, and the commentary was almost universally negative. So that
indeed,
there's lots of things we can work on.
Yes. Well, I've met you, which is, a huge start, and there's a kind of irony in that. I mean, I guess I have to go back and go through all the comments again, because I haven't in about a week, because I have to go back and respond to any questions, if any, and also deal with the insults, etc. But I haven't done that for a while. But I mean, hopefully, there will be others who will do the same thing. But I suspect many of them just don't want to go there, because they still think Christianity can work. And that, I think, is again the problem. And that's why I kind of don't agree with you there, in saying, oh, they can use Christianity, because if they're going to use Christianity, they're going to use it against, to repeat their Islamophobic tropes. And I do know there are people who are using Christian nationalism as a weapon against, Muslims and immigration as well.
Yeah.
But what about Chinese people? They're also quite Islamophobic, aren't they? Aren't they?
I think in general, Chinese people are religious phobic. I mean, in terms of like organized that form of religion, because honestly, the feeling is it's below them.
Well, yes, but I spoke to some Chinese person on X. I think he's had his account suspended, but his idea was that Marxism was really the religion and a kind of umbrella under which all the others can exist. But that is also elevating Marxism to a religion in the same way that Westerners have elevated liberalism to a religion without quite realizing it themselves, don't you think?
Completely. I mean, something that I will say about Chinese people is it's very clear that we, through our arrogance about religion being below us, we are very, very, very open to cults.
Yes, X is full of people, full of Chinese people, trying to make sense of it. A lot of people want to be liberal Democrats, and a lot of them have become Christian because I think Christianity is the biggest, the fastest growing religion in China, isn't it? Because Christianity allows them to do everything. The gambling and the pork and
and something I noticed about a lot of Chinese Christians is that they I don't think they really understand the monotheistic thing. They more or less treat it just like leaving offerings to the statue of Guan Yin or Guan Gong. So
yes.
Even the Christianity for Chinese is very, very, very culty.
Well, yes. I mean, thank you for reminding me of Guan Yin, which is the Buddhist goddess, right? She's
God or
the
goddess
of mercy. Yeah. Yes,
of mercy and childbirth.
Yes, and of course that would be very popular with the Chinese, and the cult of worshipping a woman was obviously irresistible to the Roman Catholics, who used to worship Mary, Mother of God, as a hymn would go. But what I've noticed also is that there is a Buddhist temple, and I looked at the idol of Buddha, and I thought it's a woman's face, and I asked my mother, is this actually the Buddha or some kind of feminine deity? And she said, oh no, it's a Buddha, but they made his face into a beautiful woman, which is quite unusual, in order to attract the tourists. That was what she said. And obviously, the face of a woman is, more beautiful to look at than a man's, I suppose, or certainly that of a fat man with, dangly earlobes, which is how the Buddha is traditionally portrayed.
I think the Pali Canon description of the Buddha was that, I mean, his clan, for example, is the warrior clan, and he was supposed to be quite a manly man, actually, and like something like a giant. So I guess it's just, mythological spin as these things happen to adapt to the circumstances. But I mean, I do think that the first idolatry is always mother, so that kind of makes sense. The first coping mechanism is always mother.
To believe in it, really, or want to look at the
women too. Women too. I mean, both mother, but all of us rely on mother early in life, whether we're men or women.
Mm-hmm. And so the same deep, emotions are aroused when we look at a beautiful woman holding a baby, and
especially around mercy and mercy, compassion, and giving. Yeah, the first idolatry is always mother.
Yeah, and then it leads to the kind of abandonment of reason, going back to childhood, full of emotion and needs and blah blah. And it stupefies a lot of people, I think. Well, if you force them, like God says this, what are you going to do about that? And then at least some of the of our capacity for reasoning will be revived or stimulated. And yes, I suppose being trained as a lawyer, I feel that the answer must be, I guess, Islamic legalism, which I know the Chinese hate. I mean, the Chinese hate legalism, but they love Confucianism because Confucius was telling kings to be good, good fellows, while legalism is just the art of frightening, people into obeying the law. But yes, idolatry is something that can run and run because, sadly, too many people, including Jews and Muslims, don't take it seriously enough. And they may, as you were saying, be guilty of shirk themselves, these Jews and Muslims apparently praying correctly. And yes, I would be the first to acknowledge that.
Yeah. I think we've all basically, by default, we have to assume we're all infected by the cult of reason now. So it's something for us to always be on the lookout for.
Yes. And I think reason bound by moral principles would be acceptable, but obviously not reason, exceeding
Indeed.
moral principles that we know.
And a sign is swinging back and forth from extremes. So, really loving reason and then really loving emotionality. It's especially between generations. There's no consistency because they're constantly fighting between each other about which side is correct. Well, they're both correct. And if you don't encompass them both like a oneness can, then you're going to see the fruit of that.
Yes, and the Greeks had this idea of the Apollonian and the
Dionysian.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so I mean, obviously, we need both. We need. I mean, emotions are really a way of checking if our reason is working for us. I think.
Well, yeah, the way that the dogs and children and women do their thing is not through reason. It's through you detect hypocrites. I think the Quran says that even the prophet will be fooled by the hypocrite's appearances. You mostly hear it in the voice, but you'll be able to hear it clearly in the voice. So it's in the tone of the voice, not in what they say. And you have to really be in touch with your emotions to be relatively accurate and reliable at that. And then, not do false positives all the time and just get fooled all the time.
Yes,
but Claire, I've really got to go. It's 9:30 here.
Thank you for spending your Friday evening with me. And
my pleasure.
And I hope to see you next time. It's been very enjoyable talking about idolatry. And thank you again, Lionel.
Pleasure, Claire. You have a good morning. Bye.
You too. Bye.